Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, was that what you wanted?
Brad, it was fantastic. And more importantly, it's what our listeners want.
And you've really had a lot of people ask about that?
No, I had a lot of people tell me about it. I wouldn't say ask. I would say they said, can we get the jingle back?
Interesting, because we cleaned up the show on purpose to try to make it less radio and, sort of quick ins and outs and stuff like that. It always drives me nuts when I'm a YouTube guy and I watch a lot of YouTube videos and I see these guys that have like a 2-minute intro. Hey, yes. And it's all this artsy craftsy stuff. Hey, just, do a 10-second intro, cool little logo fade in or something like that, or logo dissolve or, something catchy, and get to the meat and potatoes. You know what I'm saying?
I love it, Brad. When I'm trying to fix the float on my toilet, I don't want to hear about why you started your plumbing company in Sheboygan.
Right, exactly. That's a separate video. If you want to know, hey, if you want to find out how I started my plumbing company in Sheboygan, listen to my, video or watch my so-and-so video. But hey, here's how to replace your float. Okay, that is John Combest, COMBEST, every single day. By the way, I should say that I didn't do this. I'm trying to do this more often. This is December 18th. I do this 2024 because of the fact that sometimes we have people that listen. Actually, we have a lot of people that listen to the show down the line, either on the bjshow.co page, which is a true podcast, or on the bjshow.video page, which is a YouTube kind of podcast, YouTube video cast, whatever you want to call it. And I think sometimes we talk about things, and if you know the date reference, it'll make more sense when we say today's December 18th. But we do this show live between 7 and 8 o'clock, Monday through Friday. And it's interesting because one of the best of shows was just on. I learned a very important thing from John, which I thought was interesting.
Really? What's that, Brad?
The difference between daily and what's the thing again? You said if someone does a show Monday,
weekday, yeah,
and weekdays. Okay, if someone does a show daily, that means they do it 7 days a week. If someone does it weekdays, it's essentially Monday through Friday. So if someone says we have a daily show, and if they're off on Saturday and Sunday, it's not really a daily show then, right?
You're exactly right. And our friends at This Week in Missouri Politics and the Missouri Times will be starting a newsletter at the first week of session, Brad, and the great Jake Kroesen will be doing the daily, I got to correct myself, the weekday. I believe it's going to be a weekday newsletter. Now, it's not a daily newsletter because they'll do it Monday through Friday. So I know Jake will title it a weekday newsletter. You'll get weekday updates. But daily means 7 days a week, and weekday means 5 days a week. You and I do a weekday show.
Right, we do a weekday show. And sometimes people say we do a very weak show, but that's a whole other story, right? Okay.
Go ahead, Brad.
So that's John Combest, COMBEST. Every single day he wakes up early, puts together this incredible list of all sorts of things going on in the state of Missouri, mostly politics. Sometimes it's human interest. Sometimes it's wacky stuff. But most of the stuff you should really know about because it affects you in your daily life. You may not realize it, what these legislators and people like that in the city and the county and the state and the things they're doing. You might not realize it when it goes into effect, but you will realize it when you are arrested for something you didn't know was against law anymore. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, John puts that together. We start off this show with this guy right here. His name is... Hold on, I'm going to do it again. Hit the button wrong.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what we do is we start off with...
In third place...
Speaking of This Week in Missouri Politics, our number 3 story today comes from the great Mary Elizabeth Coleman. And she's just a veritable diamond mine of gems, Brad. She sat down with Scott, with Jake Kroesen, and Kelton Turner, of course, off camera, and talked about the session that's coming up. 2 important things from this show, Brad. I should say one important thing and then one punchline. The important thing is Scott asked Mary Elizabeth Coleman about the fact that she's been around the legislature a few years now, first elected to the Missouri House, then elected to the Missouri Senate. Mary Elizabeth Coleman is one of those senators, Brad, that's not really aligned with a faction. You know what I mean? Like, she's not a member of the Freedom Caucus, and then she's not a member. You could say that there's a group of people who are really closely aligned with the new Senate leader, Cindy O'Loughlin. And there are people that were really tightly aligned with Caleb Rowden. Mary Elizabeth Coleman really hasn't been a member of any faction. And Scott asked her about that. And I think it's worth listening to. I, of course, have the timestamps up today, Brad. And Mary Elizabeth Coleman says that her allegiance really is to her district. So her district is pro-life, pro-gun, pro-labor. And so Mary Elizabeth Coleman's votes have to do with what the folks of Jefferson County have elected her to do. They didn't elect her to be part of one faction or another. They elected her to represent their values. And I thought it was an interesting nugget, Brad, because we talk a lot on this show about the Freedom Caucus and then Freedom Caucus versus quote unquote regular Republicans. But, Mary Elizabeth Coleman doesn't feel a need to put on a jersey for either team. You get what I'm saying, Brad?
I turned my microphone.
And so the other line that I would point out is Mary Elizabeth Coleman, they were making a reference to, I won't even mention the term because you'll get off on one of your Brad Weaving things and tell some story from 1978. But they were talking about the city of Festus. And Mary Elizabeth Coleman was talking about the fact that Festus is much different than you used to think of it, Brad. It's got a Starbucks now. Scott Vaughn said, I don't want to live in a world where Festus has a Starbucks.
It's okay. Should I play the quote right now?
Oh, go right ahead, Brad.
Is it time for MEC on the radio?
Time.
Okay, here we go.
I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
That is the very first drop that I ever got from John. And was that on a Scott Vaughn show that she said that?
Yeah, I think it was like 2022, maybe 2021. Yeah, it was a memorable one.
Okay, give me the line again about Scott Vaughn. He doesn't want to live in a Festus that has a Starbucks.
You don't want to live in a world where Festus has a Starbucks.
John,
now think about that. You want to go to Festus. I mean, I get his point. You go down to Festus, you don't want to see a Starbucks. You don't want to see a Prius. You don't want to see a beautiful, svelte white woman in yoga pants. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, couple questions.
I do, but most people don't.
A couple questions for you. Is Mary Elizabeth Coleman's district exclusively Jefferson County? Is that all she does?
Yeah, I don't think her district touches any of St. Louis County, but I could be wrong. I don't know her district boundaries by heart.
Because, it's interesting. A lot of people don't realize when you get down in certain parts, like, for example, when you drive out on Highway 30 and in Gravois Bluffs, there's certain parts of Fenton that are in Jefferson County. And just like, for example, when you get off of 44 there in Eureka, you don't go that far south on W than when you're in Jefferson County as well, too. Matter of fact, I had a couple friends that lived in down there off of W. Can't remember the cross street. But anyway, the long story made short was they had a Eureka address, but they lived in Jefferson County, because that's the county line. So, when you think of, I think a lot of people think of Jefferson County, you go south on 55, you cross over the Merrimack River Bridge, but Jefferson County goes far out west, and it touches St. Louis County and Franklin County as well, too, which is...
Yeah, you're right about that. Now, I'm looking at the map here, and if I'm reading this correctly, Brad, with my middle-aged man decreasing eyesight, I believe you're correct. I believe she does not go into St. Louis County, but someone will correct us if I'm incorrect on this.
So Brad, she's pretty much got one county, and I would imagine that's probably, 120, 130,000 people population in Jefferson County?
Yeah, I don't know the number, but it's a ton of people.
Okay, are we ready for number 2?
We are.
Up a notch to number 2.
It's official, Brad. Missouri is a Donald Trump state for the third time in a row. Yesterday in Jefferson City, our electors cast Missouri's 10 electoral votes for Donald J. Trump. Did you see any of this coverage, Brad? It was all over the state news.
I think you're being facetious, aren't you? Because I don't remember hearing anything about it. Or was I just...
Oh, okay. No, I'm not being facetious at all. No, so there was a big to-do in Jefferson City at the state capitol in which folks cast their votes. And Brad, you will be pleased to know that a couple folks that you know, or at least 2 or 3 folks that you know, were there casting votes for Donald Trump. That would include your friend and mine, Bill Eigel, and also your friend Joe Brazel was there casting one of the electoral votes for Donald Trump. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Is Joe Brazel an elector?
Yeah, he was.
Interesting.
And I should give a shout out to Ryan Haidt on The Reckoning. To be frank, to be fair and frank, I wasn't even aware that this was going on yesterday. But I listened to Ryan's show in the car, and Ryan ran through the names of a few electors, including Bev Allen, a longtime activist here in the St. Louis pro-life community and the Missouri pro-life community. So then I checked it out online, and the Gray family of television stations, that's KMOV, KY3, KCTV, all those guys, they had a story. And then the News Tribune had a story this morning, too. So that to answer your question, Brad, yes, Joe Brazel is an elector along with other top Republicans across the state.
Joe Brazel's an interesting guy. I have a lot of respect for Joe. He's usually, I don't want to call him the curmudgeon, but he's usually the guy who doesn't go along with the other county council people. Now, I'm not saying that's all the time, and it's interesting. If you ever gone to the county council meeting, he's very, very, very focused on the fact that, what are our dollars going for? And to me, he's sort of that guy that I appreciate because instead of just like, hey, let's just throw some money at it, he's the guy that's going like, hey, look, this is the taxpayers' money. We should guard it. We should spend it thriftily. You know what I'm saying? We should just...
I would never get elected in St. Louis City, Brad.
Yeah, well,
he better never cross that bridge.
And he lives out there in the Augusta area, and it's interesting because of the fact that at one point in time, I don't know if it's still true or not, he wasn't wild about me because of the fact that where he lives, he says that one of the windows of his house, he looked out his house and he'd see my tower light blinking, which he wasn't happy about. But
nice. It's kind of like a Brad Hildebrand wink 24 hours a day.
Well, but the interesting thing about it is he gets things done. At least that's my perspective. There may be people saying, come on, Joe. But I mean, I'm just saying, I'm saying what he's saying. Now, how do you here's a dumb question. We got a little bit of time here. How do you get
to be a dumb question at all.
How do you get to be an elector?
Well, I think it's much the same way that you would get to be a presidential, let's say, a delegate to the Republican National Convention, or maybe if you would start at the state convention and then go to the national convention. You pretty much, in general, Brad, the traditional way is to work your way up through the party system, through the party structure. In a case of some folks, and we saw this last year with the fight at the state convention, it's more of getting your own grassroots support in whatever jurisdiction you're in and having folks who either lead a state Republican committee or a county committee or a township vouch for you. Now, I will say, Brad, that if there's one system that really favors people who've been around for a long time, who've quote unquote paid their dues, it's really the presidential elector system. And you could see over the years that it's usually given, these spots are usually given as a thank you to people who have a long period of service. And I would say too, I'd flag this too, put an asterisk in this, because Mary Elizabeth Coleman talked about this with Scott Fawn, and this didn't make our top 3 today, but it's relevant. There's a fight going on for who will be the next chair of the Missouri Republican Party. And it's still that same kind of fight. We have Governor Mike Kehoe is supporting Peter Kinder. You remember Peter Kinder?
I heard him
yesterday.
And
there's some other folks who are inserting themselves into the conversation, and they say that they might run too, Brad.
I heard Peter Kinder yesterday on the radio, by the way. Okay, by the way, I have to bring up another MEC thing, but I won't do it until we're done with number 1, which is coming up right now.
The number 1.
Brad, 2 of our federal elected officials were on radio and television yesterday talking about an important topic that we surprisingly haven't spent much time talking about. What the hell is going on with these drones, Brad?
I know a little bit about...
What's your theory?
Well, I know a little bit more about this than I should because of the fact that I have been very close to taking my drone pilot license. Even though I don't have a drone, I'm fascinated by this, and if I got my license, I would like to. But there's a whole, we could do a 10-minute discussion on this because what's sort of fascinating about this is there's a guy, just this morning I heard him on somebody, I can't remember what I was listening to. I'm punching buttons again this morning. And he was saying that the drones are not properly regulated. And I'm going like, no, hold on a minute, Al. Ask anybody who's bought a drone recently. There's all sorts of new crazy regulations on the drones. But I think this is one of these interesting things. This is the, shall we say, the democratization of airspace. If I said that, would that make any sense to you at all?
Yeah. That makes it sound like I should get a little plane and then take up a whole bunch of runway space and annoy people out at Lambert. Real quick, Brad, before we get back to that, I would point out that Josh Hawley was on Fox News. He was on Jesse Waters' show. U.S. Congressman Eric Burlison from the Springfield part of the state was on KSGF, the Nick Reed show. And they were talking about this. And they didn't have exactly the same message, but Hawley's point was that the government knows clearly a set of information about what's going on here. Why aren't they telling us? Eric Burlison says pretty much the same thing, but also he has heard, and he says there is a chance that most of these drones are just hobbyists. But we don't know until the government starts coming clean with what they know.
Well, I guess, you and I have talked about this before. It's one of those things where after you have 51 government officials who sign a letter that say that Hunter Biden's laptop was a fraud, it was Russian disinformation, and after you have all these cabinet officials who, by the way, said it again yesterday, oh, Joe Biden, when he's in a cabinet meeting, he's the sharpest tool in the drawer. He's bouncing off the walls. And we're going like, yeah, right. We don't. And you've heard all these other crazy things. They're going like, okay, don't you think there's a trust issue with our government right now? I mean, on many different levels.
Let me interrupt. That was also Eric Burlison's point, is like, how many times is the government going to lie to us about this? And Hawley points out that China sent a spy balloon over the mainland United States, and the government lied about that for a while.
Right.
So come on, man.
And you know what the interesting part of that is? They shot the spy balloon down off the eastern coast, mid-Atlantic coast of the United States, and they retrieved all the electronics. Have you heard anything about that since? Have you heard
not at all?
Anything about what they recovered and what kind of devices were on board? Because the minute they get that stuff, the intelligence people go, okay, this is for picking up radar traffic. This is for picking up this was a super high tech camera that was picking up ants on the ground. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
I do, yeah.
Okay, are we done with that?
We are, yeah.
Okay, here's the story of Mary Elizabeth Coleman you didn't mention. And it also involves Nick, and I can never pronounce his name correctly, Nick, the guy who doesn't like me.
Yeah, it's really simple, Schroer.
Mick Schroer. I want to call him Schroer, but it's Schroer, okay? Do you know what they are both doing?
No idea. They're both being senators.
They are both proposing legislation in their districts, Nick being in the, I don't know what district that is, but he's down in Defiance now, and in St. Charles County, obviously. And then Mary Elizabeth Coleman, they are proposing legislation to but essentially make some of the roads the Donald J. Trump Memorial Highways.
No, are you serious?
Yes. True story.
Yeah, I've read several articles about this on this brand new website called johncombest.com.
Well, but
Tell us more about it, Brad.
Well, John, you didn't talk about that when you brought up Mary Elizabeth Coleman. But
well, there's probably 47 things I could say about Mary Elizabeth Coleman. No, but I don't mean to be sarcastic. But yes, I've had stories about this for a few weeks, Brad. It's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up.
Well,
in fact, Brad, today I have a story from the Post-Dispatch that mentions that proletariat, like people who don't pay attention to my website or keep up with headlines, probably only saw it in the Post-Dispatch recently. But yeah, it's been talked about for a few weeks now.
Okay, but so John's making fun of me again because I'm not.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying people that
the reason
in news have seen it.
The reason I brought it up was because I've heard it mentioned. It was on the news quite a bit yesterday and early this morning about the fact that, and for example, I'm against this, okay? I think this is wrong. And even to the point where I think it's to the point where I'm against the Martin Luther Kings and the Barack Obamas and all that kind of stuff. And the reason I'm against this is because you saw the perfect example of this in the St. Louis area and all over the country with the statues. You put up a statue and you honor Robert E. Lee, and then so many decades later, somebody comes along and say Robert E. Lee was a terrible criminal. And a matter of fact, do you know the crazy weird story about Robert E. Lee and his impact on the city of St. Louis? Do you know this story?
No, I don't.
Once upon a time, Robert E. Lee was, I think, were a predecessor to the Army Corps of Engineers, and there was a problem with sandbars that were forming in front of downtown St. Louis at the time, where the arch is, but that used to be where all the steamboats and all the various, the boats that docked there and the passengers and the cargo that was onloaded and offloaded and stuff like that. And he worked with a group of construction people, and they worked to do, I can't remember exactly what they did, but they did some things in the channel of the Mississippi which directed the flow a little bit differently, thereby not putting sandbars in front of the downtown docks in St. Louis. So when you talk about Robert E. Lee and you go like, he's a terrible person, he was one of these guys for the South, he had redeeming qualities, but yet don't tell that to people that tore down statues all over the place. That's the same reason I'm saying, like, we don't need a Donald Trump highway. And for example, you probably know this, there's a main street, actually it's where a lot of the businesses are in Lake St. Louis, that's the Ronald Reagan Parkway. Do you know about this?
I do, yeah, I've seen it. It's a major thoroughfare out there.
Right. I think it's wrong, but that's just me. And what I don't get is, like, for example, I was in Jefferson City yesterday. I'll tell this story next break. But for example, if you go west on 70, the new interchange out there between Wentzville and Forestel is the David Hochul Parkway. Okay, who's David Hochul? Do you know who that is?
No, I don't.
I have no idea either. And I'm going like, okay, if you're going to name these things, and for example, there's an overpass on 364, the first overpass when you come across the Missouri River into St. Charles County. The overpass right there, which is on one side, it's Upper Bottom Road. The other side, it's Arena Parkway. That also has somebody's name on it. And I'm going like, okay, who's that? I think if you're going to name stuff, there should be some kind of a restriction or law or something that said, stick a plaque down there where you can go and read, this is why this is named the David Hochul Parkway. David Hochul was, and I'm going to have people that are going to call me up. Matter of fact, there's an interesting thing right now. I know Ralph Borelli who is a professor. I don't know if he retired or not, but a professor out at Logan College who I used to do classes for out there. And there's a Ralph Borelli Memorial Parkway or Memorial Section on I-70. I thought that was him. I called him up one day and he goes, nope, that's not me. That's another Ralph Borelli. I'm going, really? There's more than one Ralph Borelli? I know there was that. But, I don't know who, am I being weird by saying I don't know who these people are? And we should know who these people are if we're going to name stuff after them. You know what I'm saying?
I think there's only so many trees that you can name roads after. I think there's only so many geographic and geological elements that you can name stuff after. So I think naming stuff after people is a great idea. And I have officially withdrawn my proposal with the St. Charles County Council to rename Kisker Boulevard as Brad Hildebrand Road. So, okay, fine, Brad. I mean, if you want to look a gift horse in the mouth.
I do.
You know what I'm saying? It was I picked Kisker because it's long and meandering and usually just doesn't really go anywhere.
No, it's 4 lanes now. It's very nice.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?